Hello, and welcome to this week's ILTV Insider. I'm your host, Maayan Hoffman. In an extensive 4-hour operation early Saturday, the Israeli Air Force targeted over 20 military sites across Iran, primarily concentrating on air defense systems and missile manufacturing facilities. The operation was meticulously planned and exposed weaknesses in Iran's air defense systems, which the Israeli Air Force disabled early on, suggesting these defenses would likely struggle to withstand larger, more comprehensive assaults in the future. However, there is no indication that the early Saturday strikes significantly impacted the regime's offensive strength. And in reality, as long as the current leadership of the Islamic Republic holds power, it can be expected to continue attempts to threaten Israel. Will Iranian aggression persist? For how long can this regime endure? To discuss these questions and more, we have two very special guests today, all the way from the United States. Please welcome Marty Youssefiani, CEO of the Ballestra Group, a Washington-based political strategist to the Iranian opposition and a fellow of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. We also have founder of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the IRGC, turned opposition figure and pro-democracy advocate, Mohsen Sazegara from New York. Okay, welcome both of you. Let's get started. So I want to start with your thoughts actually on the Israeli strikes. Do you believe that Israel's actions were measured, or did they go not far enough or too far? Why don't you start, Marty?
Thank you, Maayan, for having us today. In fact, primarily a degradation operation. I personally do not think that the strikes went too far, although strategically calibrated, the strikes, in my view, were a significant success in reaffirming Israel's military supremacy. It re-established deterrence, considering the breadth of the operation, actually over 1,500 kilometers from Tel Aviv, hitting strategic targets. It was clearly a success, probably a historic feat in that an operation of this caliber has not ever been done. However, I believe many will also observe that the strikes did not, in fact, match the boisterous rhetoric that was repeated by Israeli leaders, the defense minister in specific, in advance of the strikes. As is often known, raising expectations is always a challenge in that meeting them is never enough. So the rhetoric that was offered in advance of it did not match, but also observers realize that this may only be the first of rounds to come.
Well, and that's very interesting, Mohsen. I'd love for you to respond as well, because as he mentioned the rhetoric, what I think that Marty is talking about is the idea that we would potentially attack Iranian nuclear facilities, or at least attack maybe the energy infrastructure, the oil, which could have been much more impactful in other ways. Mohsen, what do you think about that?
As an Iranian, of course, I don't like, infrastructure of Iran will be under attack, because people will be in trouble. If energy centers or other infrastructure will be destroyed, then the problem will be with the people of Iran. So I think that this strike, I may call it the first round of direct conflict and the military conflict between two countries, was targeted to air defense and missile centers, especially production of the fuel, solid fuel of the missiles. But it has had, so far, it has its impact on regime of Iran and the people as well.
So what are you hearing, if you don't mind my asking? I mean, what are you hearing from the people in Iran, given that that you're obviously following the Farsi media and you're seeing what is really being said? How is the public itself reacting? Mohsen, you can keep going. Or Marty?
You know, people of Iran don't get their news from the official media of the regime. It's now for a while that the main source of news for the people of Iran is outside Iran. Some satellite TVs, London-based satellite TVs like Iran International or Iran Farda, or other VOA Farsi, BBC Farsi, they are the main sources of the news of the people of Iran, and more than all of them is social media. People get their news from social media. Don't trust the propaganda of the regime. Propaganda of the regime in this regard is to show the people that nothing has happened and Israel didn't succeed to attack anything. It was just a low, very, very low impact of the air defense of Iran and other things. But people have their own judgment.
Well, it's interesting, and Marty, I want to jump a little bit back to you, if you don't mind, for me to kind of take this a little bit further, because I think what's interesting is you mentioned how the internal media is really trying to articulate that, oh yeah, everything is fine. There were a lot of images on Iranian TV of life going on as usual. But you know, if we had attacked more severely, potentially the energy infrastructure, my understanding is that could lead to the regime actually falling. And if this regime does not fall, which clearly from this attack it will not, what do you see as the future for the Iranian people? I mean, don't you believe there is a regime change that is crucial for them, maybe even more so than it is for the Israelis?
Well, Maya, it's important when we talk about Iran. I think this is a position of all Iranians that we constantly wish to remind the world that when we talk about Iran, it's important, it's essential to delineate and make a distinction between the Iranian people versus the Iranian regime. What this operation and all of the rhetoric in advance of it accomplished was that it clearly defined that this action was not against the Iranian people. After all, we do know that according to ADL, not too long ago, the Anti-Defamation League, Iran was identified as the least anti-Semitic country, as the least anti-Semitic Muslim Middle Eastern country, even less anti-Semitic than some European nations. So it's important to make sure that the connection with the Iranian people is not lost. Secondly, we have just been beneficiaries of a leaked public opinion survey that was just conducted last year that the regime leaked, where 90% of the Iranian people expressed deep satisfaction with the status of things in Iran and being completely at a loss with any hope, realizing and stating that they do not see an opportunity to repair or redirect or correct or what the Iranian regime every now and then offers as reformists of the current system. So we have a very, very oppressed, very, very, what you can say, dissatisfied, mass discontented population that need to be invested on when we talk about regime change in Iran. No regime change can ever be accomplished through military actions. However, what needs to be done is more investment needs to be done on the Iranian people.
So, Mohsen, I want to return back to you just for a minute, and I don't want to take too long on this, but could you just take 30 seconds to describe what daily life is actually like for Iranians under the current regime? What are the unique challenges that they're facing beyond what Morty's already told us?
To explain better, I think that we should notice that the military doctrine of regime of Iran during the last at least 25 years was based on three pillars. First, asymmetric war or terrorist group, better to say. Second, missile attacks. And third, as a deterrent, atomic nuclear weapons and the nuclear project of Iran. These three are the main basis of the military doctrine of regime of Iran. Now, during the last 1 year, after October the 7th last year, so far, especially during the last 3-4 months, two of them have been somehow destroyed by Israelis. I mean, missile attacks was controlled, was defended by Israelis, and it was shown that it's not as important as Iranian military people thought about that. Second, the terrorist groups, Hamas, Jihad Islami, or Hezbollah, have been destroyed, almost destroyed by Israel. So now there is problems inside Hashd al-Sha'bi in Iraq or in Syria or in Yemen. So this second part of military doctrine of Iran now is under big question mark for Iranian regime. And nuclear issue is something that I think that was a stupid project from the first day. So I think that now is the time that the leader of Iran should think about the political consequences of such a defeat in military doctrine that they have followed during the last 25 years.
Yeah, but Mohsen, I think we know that the current regime is not necessarily going to be thinking politically and be thinking about the people. At least that's not what we've seen so far. In fact, I'm wondering if the strikes that happen now will push Khamenei potentially to actually move further and faster with the nuclear proliferation in order to better destroy Israel. We're talking about some potential counterattack. You know, U.S. President Biden said, hey, let's hope that this is the end. But Iran is not sounding like this is going to be the end. But either one of you, Marty, why don't you start? What are your take on that? Is this going to push us closer to a nuclear weapon, closer to a counterattack?
Well, of course, the old saying is that it's the nature of the beast on the trigger and not the trigger itself. Here, of course, the world has always worried about a regime which has demonstrated its nature, what would happen if it were to actually be equipped with nuclear weapons. Let me add this dimension and perspective. The fact is that Iran is currently a nuclear threshold state. And sometimes the threat, only the threat of taking the final step, may be more valuable in terms of political leverage than actually taking the final step. Why do I say that? Because let's imagine the unimaginable, and if Iran we were to wake up and if Iran, the regime, would detonate a bomb to show the world that it has the capacity, it will then need to deal with a whole host of challenges that it will not be able to curtail. One being regional proliferation. What will the other states in the region do? That will lead to a production race which the Iranian regime financially cannot sustain, and also further isolation. Moreover, don't forget, Russia and China, the two other pillars that are sustaining Iran today, will not find it in their interest to see a nuclear Iran. So my point here is sometimes a regime under the conditions that the Islamic Republic of Iran is facing today, it finds itself more interested in keeping the threat as opposed to taking the final step. Having said that, we always worry about what might happen. And part of the operation that we saw today, or actually this past week with the Israeli strikes, the first wave, as Dr. Sazegara said, it was actually a degradation operation, making sure those delivery mechanisms, at least first round, are curtailed and as a deterrence for any such move. So
now, Israel has always considered Iran to be some kind of existential threat. I mean, certainly it's something that we talk about in this country all the time. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has displayed, the nuclear bomb and what that could look like at the United Nations. Do you believe that that is then an accurate depiction, or maybe the work or the counter-attack and counterattacks that are going on now might actually be making Iran less of a threat? Mohsen, why don't you start with that?
I think that the final solution for Iran problem, not only for Israel, but for other countries in the region, and whatever this regime is doing, the key is at the hands of the people of Iran. That's it. Bringing down the regime of Iran is exclusively the responsibility of the people of Iran. And now we know that absolute majority of the people of Iran don't like this regime, especially the economic pressure on the people, a high rate of inflation, recession at the same time. Now people want to get rid of this regime. They are really tired of such a kleptocracy that is running Iran, corruption everywhere. So I think that the best way to solve the problem of the regime of Iran is helping the people of Iran to overthrow this regime and found a secular democracy in Iran and live with the world.
Well, I mean, unless I misunderstood you, Marty, I mean, I feel like the survey that you referred to actually said that the people don't feel that they can overthrow the regime. So if that's the case, if the only way to overthrow the regime is through internal pressure, yet the people feel they can't exert that pressure, so are we just at a stalemate?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Marty,
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we have history to look at in terms of giving us a roadmap of what might be ahead. To be clear, much like communism in the Soviet Union, Islamist governance in Iran is destined to fall. Like communism, Islamist governance offers an epic but dark ideology. It has needed time to prove its significant shortcoming, and net result of 45 years of Islamic Republic, the Iranian people will be the first to tell you that it has not worked. Kleptocracy, incompetence, corruption, all of that under the guise of religious ideology, Iranian people, 90 million of them will tell you, is not a solution. Now, the world will see much of that as fact, much like when the Iron Curtain fell and the world saw the net result of the carnage communism left behind. So the point here is that at the end of the day, it will be the Iranian people. This is a war of narratives that we can only win by winning the hearts and minds of the Iranian people, giving them the courage, the confidence to stand up, and invariably, that suppressive machine will fall short.
So we're going to run out of time, but I do want to turn to you, Mohsen, and take a bit of a tangent before we jump back to what we were talking about, because you actually helped found the IRGC. And we hear Marty talking about how corrupt and how this doesn't work. When you founded that organization, what were your intentions at the time and what went wrong? How did this happen?
Oh, long story.
But make it a short story.
That IRGC, that I was one of the founders, was not this IRGC. That IRGC was something, a people army. One of the models that I studied about that on those days was Israel army and Switzerland army. Now, this IRGC is a monster. It's something that had several deviations from the first definition and first mission. Now it's something that I can call it's unique, because at the same time it's like a military, like the mafia group, like the KGB for the people of Iran, and corrupted in many, many parts. They are involved in economy of Iran, in oil smuggling, money laundering, and blah, 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 and like terrorist group. So this organization, which I sometimes I call it like a dragon with 7 heads, that every head is independent from the others, and sometimes they're fighting each other inside themselves. So this organization is related to the leader of Iran. Don't forget
Right,
that
it's now related
leader
to
of
the
Iran
leader.
and the companies and the institutions that he has is another part of the power in Iran.
So I want to stop you. We are really out of time, but I do need to get a final thought from you, Marty, just on one thing. I mean, there is no crystal ball. I know that you're not a prophet, but if you can give us in 30 seconds, what is next? What can we expect to see next here in Israel with Iran?
Well, I think the Iranian regime's hands are severely curtailed, not only through the degradation strikes that were exercised this week, but also the past year, the Iranian regime has lost 2, possibly 3 of its legs. Hamas, Hezbollah, and I believe the Houthis are going to be severely degraded, and therefore the Iranian regime will need to reassess where it stands. Will it take the drink from the poisonous chalice like Khomeini did after Saddam Hussein's attack on Iran, or will it go forward with more hostility? I tend to believe that the Iranian regime will have no choice but to try to see if it can cut a grand bargain with the West.
Well, thank you for that. And that's unfortunately all the time that we have this evening. I do want to thank you for sharing your analysis and your opinions. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv. Thanks for watching. Have a safe and pleasant evening.